scary stories. To give a little background information, this started in the winter of 2012. I was 23 years old at the time and living with my dad. My mom and my brother were living in another house about 10 minutes away from us. One morning I woke up around 8 a.m. because I had an early doctor's appointment, and I went outside to see a note pinned to the windshield wiper of our car. The note said, "I'm going to kill you, scum." I kinda laughed it off. I assumed the note was from my dad, who had a habit of complaining to parents in our neighborhood about their children's shitty behavior. There were these twin boys who liked to try and catch and torture squirrels. He often marched them home by their ears to complain about them to their parents. I thought one of the parents was just being a douchebag, so my dad and I didn't bother with it too much. Later in the day, while talking to my mom on the phone, I mentioned the note to her half-heartedly in a casual way, and I was shocked by her response. She responded by emphatically warning me several times to make sure all of my windows and doors were locked, and to bring a weapon to bed with me at night. I was a bit taken aback because she'd never said anything to me like that before. She'd never even given me the good touch, bad touch talk. She reminded me at least 12 times over the course of the conversation to bring a knife or a baseball bat to bed with me and to lock my bedroom door at night. I thought she was just overreacting, so I waved her off. Then other weird things started happening. We started getting random packages and deliveries sent to our house. Bibles and Qurans, newspapers, porn flyers, pizzas, and moving trucks that we hadn't ordered. The first few times it happened, I thought it was a mistake, but as it kept happening, I came to the conclusion that somebody must be pulling a prank on us. We didn't know who it was, so there was nothing we could really do about it, but apologizing profusely to yet another confused pizza delivery man. In September of that year, I started taking a night school class with my best friend. The course went from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. every Monday and Wednesday night, and after the class, his mom would pick us up and drive us home. Sometime in November, his mom dropped me off from school, and I went inside and chilled on the couch for a couple of hours. I like to wind down before I go to bed a bit, or I can't sleep. I ended up falling asleep on the couch. Something woke me up abruptly at about 4 a.m. in the morning. I heard the unmistakable sound of a car tire being slashed, and it sounded like our car. What the hell is going on? We didn't have any enemies. In retrospect, this was probably a stupid thing to do, especially considering I'm a relatively small female. I'm only 5'5", and I was 23 at the time, but I grabbed a generic kitchen knife and went outside to check it out. When I got outside, I discovered immediately that I was correct. There was a man in our driveway slashing our car tires. Unwisely, I admittedly yelled, "Hey, you!" and he turned around to face me. That was when I noticed what he was slashing our tires with, an enormous hunting knife, at least 6 inches long. He looked surprised, but then defiant, and began to advance towards me with the knife slightly raised. I just froze. I didn't know what to do. He was coming at me so fast I couldn't even think. Thankfully, at that exact moment, my across-the-street neighbor, who had also heard him slashing our tires, turned on his porch light and yelled out the window, "Hey, I'm calling the cops." The man yelled back, "I don't give a fuck. Call them then." But he quickly retreated back to his car, where I could see a middle-aged woman with long brown hair waiting for him on the passenger seat. Our eyes locked, and I knew instantly that we had met before, but I couldn't quite put my finger on where or when. I just knew in my gut that I had met this woman before. They sped off into the night, and we called the cops, who said they couldn't do anything for us because they didn't know who had done it. I mean, isn't that the kind of your job, though, to find out who did it? Herp-a-derp. I called my mom to tell her what happened and to ask her if she had any idea who would have done this to us. She immediately said no, but there was something in her voice. I could just tell that she wasn't being honest. A few weeks later, I decided to go to my mom's house to spend a day or two there, determined to get some answers. As soon as I walked in the front door, I knew something was wrong. The second she saw me, she just started bawling her eyes out. She took me by the hand and sat me on the couch and explained the whole story to me, start to finish. It's necessary for me to give a little background information here. My mom is a businesswoman by trade. She was still in sales at the time, but she's also a bit of a hippy-dippy. Astrology and pot and reincarnation and Mercury is retrograding, so don't get into any arguments this week type of person. A couple of months ago, before this all started, she had ended up being referred a new client named Adrian by her weed dealer. Yes, my mom smokes weed. This is Canada. Everyone smokes here. Adrian was her dealer's girlfriend, and she was interested in buying Arbonne, so my mom invited her over to her apartment to look at some makeup samples. They started chatting a bit about a variety of topics, and my mom let it slip that her last name was Hayes. As my mom told me, Adrian had paused for a few seconds, looked at her, and then said, "Hayes? Did you used to be married to a man named Darian Hayes?" My mom answered that yes, Darian Hayes, my father, was her ex-husband. Then, shockingly, this Adrian woman had actually burst into tears, threw her arms around my mom in a hug, and began to tell her this horrific story about all the disgusting things that my dad had done to her. Apparently, she was 14 years old. She was now in her mid-30s. I would have been about 4 years old at the time. This would have happened around 1994. She had been dating a man named Andrew, who happened to be living with my dad at the time after my parents' divorce. According to Adrian, these men, her boyfriend Andrew, Andrew's twin brother Daniel, and my father, had taken turns beating her, sexually assaulting her, and then forcing her into prostitution in order to make money off of her. Eventually, they ended up selling her into child prostitution, from which she said she never recovered. At this point, I realized that this is where I'd recognized her from. My dad had been roommates with her boyfriend Andrew, and I used to see all three of them when I went over there to visit him every second weekend. I sobbed inconsolably during the whole retelling of this story, telling my mother how after this traumatic experience she had turned to drugs and alcohol to numb the pain of her abuse, and that she had been addicted to crack and alcohol off and on ever since because of what my father had done to her. My mom was shocked. She didn't know what to do. On the one hand, she knew my father to be a generous, soft-spoken, and kind person who had never lifted a finger to her or any other person, and who rarely raised his voice. But on the other hand, it seemed odd that Adrian would just happen to remember his name all these years later. If she had been lying, we didn't know who to believe. After several hours of crying and much consoling on my mother's part, Adrian finally left, and that was when the stalking began. A few days after this encounter, my mother came home from work to find Adrian's boyfriend sitting on her couch, waiting for her. He immediately told her that he was planning on killing my father, and that my father deserved to die because he was a pedophile piece of shit, and that if my mom told anybody at all, especially the cops, that he would be sure to kill me as well. He then concluded his threat by describing the layout of our living room and exactly what outfit I was wearing that day. From then on, he and/or Adrian would text or call her several times a day to threaten and taunt her, telling her that they were going to call the cops on my dad and have him thrown in prison, that they were going to have him killed, and that if she told anybody, they would hire somebody to rape and murder me. I Naturally, my mother was absolutely terrified. She was from an upper middle class family who had immigrated to Canada from Germany. She had never dealt with this type of person before. She stopped eating, she couldn't sleep, and she even stopped going to work. She lost 30 pounds, and her hair started to fall out from stress. She started having panic attacks because she didn't know what to do. Later, she told me that she understood how I felt because I have an anxiety disorder that causes me to experience panic attacks. Eventually, after the night when I almost got stabbed, she decided that she had to call the cops. She couldn't take the chance that they would hurt me. She had to do something about it, and what she found out was shocking. Adrian was also known to the police. When my mom told them the story, he was so well known that they weren't even surprised to hear her story. In fact, they told her Adrian had done this exact same thing at least to a dozen other men. She would meet and blackmail men into giving her money, electronics, drugs, etc., threatening to call the cops and report them for rape if they did not. Her boyfriend, who was a dealer of other drugs other than just weed, as it turned out, would often use his drug connections to intimidate and extort the men, and for some reason, he never questioned her stories of being raped, abused, and enslaved by all of the other different types of men. Adrian was a crack and heroin addict and a prostitute who would get arrested on possession and drug distribution charges. She would attempt to make deals with the police by offering them information about men who were pedophiles in exchange for less time in prison. She eventually did this so many times that the police stopped believing in her. After my mom called the cops, the whole story came undone, and Adrian and her boyfriend, thankfully, haven't bothered us since. But it's been over a year since the whole thing happened, and I'm still terrified to leave the curtains open at nighttime in case somebody is watching me. I don't think I'll ever be able to feel fully safe in this house ever again. So Adrian, let's not meet again, ever. I live in a town in California. I can't tell you guys which one because I don't know if I'll regret it or not later. However, I can describe it. We are a very clean town, as in we never have any serious crime happen here, like murder or something awful that would land us in breaking news. However, when this happened, we for some reason didn't get on, even though it's a big deal. Everyone in my neighborhood know each other and genuinely trust each other, so when the house next door told my family that they would be out of town for a couple of weeks and wanted us to watch over their house while they were gone, it wasn't weird. They also gave us spare keys since they have pets in the house and they couldn't take them on their trip. They have a boxer and 2 rabbits and wanted us to feed them while they were gone, so they give us the keys and head off the next day. One of us would go over to the house and feed the pets and then leave. However, on the day that they said they would be back, they didn't. Me and my family assumed that something had happened to their car and they needed time to fix it. Rare, but it happens. The very next day, we find that they weren't back yet. Start to get a bit concerned, so my dad texts the neighbor's dad. Their dad and my dad are friends. But he doesn't get a reply. The next day, still not back. Soon the other people in the neighborhood start noticing that they haven't came back yet. At this point, someone gets the authorities involved. They question people in the neighborhood, like where they said they were going, what car they were last seen driving in, and if any contact was made. Of course, as I mentioned, with my dad trying to text one of them but not getting anything. I remember they said that they were going over to Florida for a boating trip. I don't remember where, but they said that they were going to Florida. A search party was made, both here and over in Florida. Days go by and nothing shows up. While this is happening, you would think the news would be all over this, but no one comes over to report. Because of this, I have no clue where they are, and if anything new has shown up. They went on a trip in the summer in August, and now it's winter in January. I have a bad feeling that this isn't going to end well. Either they are found, either dead or alive, or they are never coming back. But I also feel like there's something bigger to this, like weird stuff is about to happen. If anyone has any ideas to what happened, or if this has reached news somewhere, please let me know. The town my family and I live in has a chapter, or hall, however it's called. Jehovah's Witness, I mean. They've come to my house probably all of 3 times in the 7 years I've lived there. They have always been friendly to me, just trying to spread the word of God in their own special way. But last night I had a very unsettling experience, and I don't know what it means exactly. So I'll tell you and just get it over with. Last night I was at home by myself. My wife and kids were out of town visiting family, and I had to stay behind because of work. I was watching TV when I heard my front doorbell ring. I'm guessing the time was around 6 or so because I had just finished off some leftover pizza for dinner. When I looked out the small square window at the top of my front door, I saw 2 young white males standing there. Now, I kind of guessed they were Jehovah's Witnesses because, like I mentioned earlier, this wasn't the first time they had paid my home a visit. When I opened the door, I was immediately struck, smacked in the face by the frigid winter air. I started to shiver as I noticed right away that neither one of them was wearing a jacket, just a standard white dress shirt and a tie and khaki pants, despite the fact that it was about 30 degrees out at the time. Aren't you guys cold? I was cut off by the one standing closest to me on the front porch. He may have given me their names, but I can't remember. Good evening, sir. Sorry to disturb you this evening. May we take a few moments of your time to talk about our Savior, Jesus Christ? He said, this while smiling and handed me a small brochure with something about a watchtower written on it. It looked vaguely familiar, like the other brochures that I had quickly discarded all the other times before. Now, I didn't want to be rude, but I wasn't really in the mood for a religious discussion. I don't think I ever was. It's just something that I don't get very fired up about, so I gave the young man the same response I probably did the last 3 times he had been here. Oh, I'm sorry, my family and I are already part of another church in town, which was the truth, and I really do have some things around the house I need to get back to. This was a lie, other than sitting on my ass watching TV. As I said this, he seemed shocked and angered. His smile vanished, and he looked back to the younger man, standing at the bottom of my porch. The other one said nothing, only looking back with me, a similar look, like I had said something offensive. I had grown impatient and tired of standing in the cold. Well, okay, guys, have a good night, I said. I went to shut the door, and the one on my porch continued to stand there even after I had shut and relocked it. He just glared at me through the small window as I looked back. I waved and said goodbye louder this time and casually tossed the brochure into a small trash can I kept there for junk mail. As I went to head back to my living room, I instead crept into my darkened dining room and just watched the two of them through the window. They seemed to talk as they went over my next door neighbor's house, and after about getting halfway, the one I had been speaking to looked back at my house. My eyes met his, and I felt like he was looking right at me. That sent a chill down my spine. They continued on down the block while bypassing several homes until they disappeared out of my sight. I sat back in my living room chair and forced myself to shake off the feeling of uneasiness that had come over me. Soon enough, I got comfy and relaxed for the night. A little while later, I went to bed around 11, making sure to lock the front door and back door before I went upstairs. Out of a long-established habit, I made sure to double-check the deadbolt on the front door and peep outside the window. There was nothing but the sound of wind and the nighttime chill seeping in through the window. I quickly drifted off to sleep soon after, getting into bed as the world outside had gone quiet. I was awakened and immediately blinded by the sudden flood of bright light above my head. Someone had turned my bedroom light on. I tried to sit up while shielding my eyes, but I was pushed back down hard into the bed by some powerful unseen force. Something held me down in place as I struggled to move. As my eyes started to adjust, I saw two individuals standing at the footboard of my bed. They were the two Jehovah's Witnesses from earlier tonight. I didn't give them the chance to speak first this time. "What the fuck are you doing in my house? How did you get in?" My rant was silenced when one of them briskly raised his hand and something unseen forced my mouth shut. They both just stood there staring at me and acting like this was all so normal. One of them smiled and spoke. "Mr. I'm sorry for the intrusion, but my colleague and I felt like we didn't get the opportunity earlier to connect with you about our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ." "What? You broke into my house in the middle of the night?" I struggled to move my arms against the invisible restraint. It was to no avail. "Fuck you, I'm calling the cops." One of them sighed and lowered his head in apparent frustration. "Mister, if you would please just give us a few minutes of your time, we'll be on our way then." I cursed at them again and said fuck no, as if I really had a choice. Now, I'm not going to repeat word for word the rest of their sales pitch. That's not really important because, other than the fact that they had broken into my home in the middle of the night and apparently had the ability to restrain people with their minds, the whole thing was normal. The same talk I had already heard before. All I could do was lay there helpless and listen. When I refused to answer their questions, they would make a fist, and it felt like a massive hand squeezing my chest. I thought my ribs would crack. I tried to scream for help, but it just pissed them off even more. I don't know how long it took, but they finally finished, and what I saw next is what has left me with a real sense of dread and fear. So much so that I haven't left my house yet, or even gone near a window or door. They both started to leave, with me still pinned down to my bed. I'm so thankful now that I had used the bathroom before I went to bed earlier, or else I surely would have pissed myself and soaked the bed. I watched as they passed my wife's dresser that had a large mirror attached to it. The two of them continued walking out of range of my sight. Only when I could no longer see any trace of them did my bedroom light switch off, and I was released from whatever force had been holding me down. I didn't move or make a sound for quite a while. It must have been half an hour or so when I finally felt brave enough to sit up in my bed. I perked my ears up and leaned as far forward as I could to listen for any signs that they might still be here. For all I knew, they could have still been standing right outside my bedroom door. It was at that moment that something dawned on me. I hadn't actually heard any noises indicating they had left my house. No doors being opened or shut, and it was almost impossible to walk down our stairs without making a sound because they are lament, but I hadn't heard a single creak. Somehow they had gotten into my house and upstairs without giving any indication. Still sitting in the darkness, I did the only thing I could think of, although looking back now it was kinda stupid. I swallowed hard and spoke out to the darkness. "Hello." Silence had once again enveloped the house. I got out of my bed and crept out into the hall and downstairs, flipping on lights as I went. The stairs creaked with each step I took. How had they done it? I thought. I checked the entire house, including redoing all the locks on the doors. Not even the windows had been messed with. Nobody but me. I finally made it to the living room couch and collapsed while staring out the windows, watching as the wind outside moved the tree branches. Needless to say, I didn't sleep well the rest of the night. So that's it. Crazy, I know. I called off work, faking an illness. I couldn't bring myself to leave the house. My wife and kids aren't back yet. If I told them, they'd think I was crazy, and who'd blame them? I've been checking the neighborhood for any witnesses. I haven't seen any more so far. I pray that I never do again, but something tells me I won't be so lucky. So I kind of lied when I told you that I didn't go outside at all. I did right away when I got up, just to run out to my car and grab something important. My neighbor from across the street was picking up his empty trash cans from the morning pickup. I don't even remember if I waved at him or not, but when I had shut my car door, I had my back to him. He was standing just a few feet behind me. I hadn't even heard his footsteps on the street. "Morning, neighbor," he said, in a way that sounded eerie, like he was in on the joke or something. More chills. So I was at the mall with my mother, and we were having a great time. I don't get to see my mother all that often. We went shopping for makeup, tried on a few dresses, and some shoes. I finally decided on the dress I wanted to buy. My mother had gone to the restroom for a few minutes, so I had to wait for her to come back before I could tell her that I wanted that dress, since she was the one paying for it. As I was watching for my mother, this creepy old guy comes up to me and starts talking to me. I didn't mind at first. Then he started to say inappropriate things to me. He started talking about a bunch of perverted things he would like to do to me. I screamed for security, and the guards came over to where I was at. The man took off running. The guards asked me if I was okay, and I gave them a description of the creepy old fucker. They sent the information to the police. A few days later on the news, that same old guy was arrested for hundreds of illegal videos on his computer, multiple accounts of sexual battery, molestation, and possibly murder. I am so glad that the guards at the mall responded so fast to my cries of help. I hate to think that I could have been his next victim. I feel terrible about all of the lives that he has destroyed. Creepy old bastard from the mall. I hope you fucking rot in hell, you scumbag pervert.